Hey guys, gwyned here. Today I am bringing you the Grand Championship of the Standard Pauper Double League. This is between the two winners of Phase 1 and Phase 2. ZombieNeko won Phase 1 and he is playing his Jund Allies deck. Whereas joekewwl won Phase 2 and he is playing his Pink Pain, which is basically a white weenie build with just splashing a tiny little bit of red. And so this will determine who gets the bulk of the packs donated from Wizards of the Coast. And we are off to the races here. So Joe obviously coming out of the gate strong with an early lead, playing an Erishan Cleric. And apologize for that, had to click over for something real quick, but we are back. And going to go ahead and pass the turn back. That Erishan Cleric is a card that I hadn't seen a whole lot of play before I saw Joe play it, but really I think is a great card for this particular metagame. Just the ability to gain a little bit of life and have a 1/3 that can block early actually does really well. Obviously here it makes sense to swing in against the Elvish Visionary. ZombieNeko, there's no way he would block at that point. And let's see what he's able to do here now with his turn. So basically this Allies deck just plays a lot of really solid beaters. The reason you'll see as he's going through that there's a nice little mini ally synergy to it, but basically he's just playing really efficient Jund creatures similar to a lot of other Jund decks. Colostra Healer is one that I don't think was in his original build, but he is using now simply as another ally, the ability to gain a little life, and has some tricks that he can do with that. Plays a landfall creature as well, and as you'll see as the match goes on here. So let's see what Joe's got to do on his third turn. Obviously, I would expect him to have something he can do here. He is going to go and swing in with the Erishan Cleric. His deck plays a lot of different combat tricks, so it makes sense. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he had a combat trick had ZombieNeko decided to block. You go ahead and add the Topin Freeblade onto the battlefield and pass the turn back. So Zombie easily has access to all his colors now. He's got a Reeve Soul to go ahead and take care of the Freeblade. And again, this is a pretty, about as close to the stereotypical Jund build as you can get in Standard Pauper. Great removal, efficient creatures, can deal a lot of damage very quickly with its big creatures. Just overall presents a lot of solid threats and can really do a lot of damage in a pretty short amount of time. So here, he's already got a 5-point life advantage over his opponent. And which is surprising considering that Joe's playing a pretty aggressive deck. White Weenie's usually the one who's trying to put that kind of pressure on early. So Joe's going to continue to swing in to attack and just passes the turn back. Interesting. Not sure if that means, well, he's not flooded because he didn't play a third land drop, so he must have a whole lot of combat tricks in play. So very unusual kind of situation to see. Not what you would expect to see in this build. And see, this is one of the reasons why this deck functions the way it does. Is Chijuru Stalwart. The ability to get a 3/4 for 3 mana is just so good. Even if it is just a 3/4 on the ground, that can block just about anything in the format right now. So it makes sense. So I'd assume Joe's got something that he's going to do here to get rid of something. Okay, so he's going to go ahead and play a kill shot and get one of the allies off the board, one of the healers off the board. But now he's down to 14 and really is taking quite a bit of damage. He does have a pacifism here that he's going to play on the Stalwart. That is one very old artwork pacifism. I don't know if I've ever seen that particular artwork. But once again, doesn't have a creature, is just forced to pass the turn back. Does hold the Erishan Cleric back to block, and so I would definitely expect a combat trick here. It's possible he also just has yet another piece of removal. So let's see what he's going to do here. I am noticing, interestingly enough, that it looks like Joe's almost pre-sideboarded. I don't believe his original build that he played in the finals had a pacifism in the main. So here's the Predator. Again, this looks almost exactly like the deck that I don't know if Zombies made any changes. The Valakut Predator here, again, probably the best landfall creature to come out for Battle for Zendikar. Just coming down as a 2/2 and the ability to gain +2/+2 every time a land comes into play. Obviously, just very strong. Even if it is just a ground beater, just an overall very solid card. ZombieNeko does have a land drop to go ahead and activate the Predator. And swinging in here for a lot of damage. Joe's still got 5 cards in hand, but expect a nice combination of combat tricks and removal here. Looks like Zombie's going to go ahead and hold the rest of his creatures back. Just going to attack in with the Predator. Joe's going to go ahead and block and play Celestial Flare, would be my guess based on his actions. No. Going to do Feat of Resistance. Okay, so it just basically gives him a free block here, but isn't going to do anything to stop the Predator. So I'm not sure what Joe has in his hand, but it must not be a great combination of cards because he's really hurting here. This is definitely not a typical game that you would expect to see with his deck, whereas Zombie's deck is playing out almost exactly like you would expect it to. Alright, so Joe's going to go ahead and has another pacifism. Germag Angler has been another card that I think I underestimated when it first came out. It doesn't look like all that impressive, but a 5/5 ground pounder that you can sneak in with Delve has proven to just be very good. So not only does he pacifism it, but he also gets rid of one of the Claustro healers using Fiery Impulse before passing the turn back. Did hold up white, so again, would not be surprised to see Celestial Flare here. Surprised Zombie didn't attack with one of his other creatures, but I guess he didn't. I guess he would have had to throw away the Elvish Visionary there, which might not have been the best choice. Let's see what Joe's able to do here with his combat trick. So he does block, and he has an Enshrouding Mist, which will pump it up to a 3/5. Still not enough to actually deal with the Predator. So it looks like he's got a lot of combat tricks in hand, and they're just not giving him enough juice to get rid of the creatures. But he does there finally have a Fiery Impulse after blocking the Predator several times. He's finally able to get it off the board, and has actually managed to fight through ZombieNeko's very powerful board presence and sideline most of his creatures. So maybe Joe's making a little bit of a comeback here. So Zombie's going to go ahead. Obviously, he's not blocking with the Elvish, so he's going to go ahead and swing in with it. Oh, and just passes the turn back. No other play. That's interesting, having 6-7 mana in play and nothing to play. He has access to all his colors. This is a weird game so far. Weird, kind of unusual match. See what Joe's able to do here. Is that a Tormenting Voice? I didn't actually see exactly. Oh, no, he played a Morph. I see it now. And so ZombieNeko's immediately going to go ahead and use Twin Bolt. I actually think Joe might be able to... Yeah, he's going to go ahead and... Oh, he has Feat of Resistance instead. So he'll use Feat of Resistance to avoid the Twin Bolt. Nice little piece of synergy that people may not recognize here. Those 1/1 tokens, even though it's on the morph, when he chooses to unmorph it, the +1/+1 tokens actually stay. So that's a nice little thing to keep in mind there. Zombie has a third Claustro healer. He's gained a pretty decent amount of life off of those. And otherwise just passes the turn back. So Joe goes ahead and gets his Misttooth here in untapped. And that'll end up being a nice little beater for him here. The fact that it's got Vigilance and now has 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It's gonna be pretty good here. And Joe, despite being way behind in the beginning, seems like he's done a pretty nice job of fighting back. Interesting that he's going to attack with that Visionary, but Joe, sensing some sort of trick, just decides to go ahead and let it through. And he's narrowed the life differential down to 6 points, so he's in pretty good shape. Okay, so now he does have the Tormenting Voice. One of the best reasons to be splashing red in this deck, simply because he then has the ability to discard a land and be able to really be able to gain some cards and fight back in, prevent a little bit of mana flood, which looks like he may have been experiencing. This red-white deck really doesn't want to draw more than about 4 lands, maybe 5 at the most. So the ability to get rid of some of your lands is very, very strong. So he has now taken the lead for the first time in this match. Has managed to sideline most of ZombieNeko's creatures. His opponent looks like he's a little bit flooded, which is definitely favoring Joe here as he continues to kind of fight through. Zombie doesn't really have a good answer for the Kieran at this point, so that thing's going to continue to do quite a bit of damage if Zombie's not able to deal with it. And in fact, he's got him on almost a 1-turn clock. Now, obviously, he can chump block with the healer and the Elvish Visionary to stay alive a little longer, but definitely the tide has definitely turned. But Zombie's not quite out of it yet. It does have some more removal. Get rid of the Topin Freeblade there with the Twin Bolt. Twin Bolt's a card that if you're playing red, you should definitely be playing. There's definitely some token builds out there. Certainly a 1 red deal 2 damage spell, while not as good as Shock, is still perfectly good, perfectly usable. And the fact that you can get rid of 2 -1/-1, or two 1/1 tokens with it proves to be very good. So ZombieNeko does go ahead and finally find the Colostria Nightwatch, which is definitely one of his better creatures. If he has the ability to gain life at instant speed, he can give it flying to block the Kieran. But I'd be surprised. There's not a lot of cards that let you do that at instant speed. Certainly not in the colors that Zombie's playing. And so looks like he's got one more turn to come up with something here to deal with the Kieran, or he is going to go ahead and be down a game. So he is going to go ahead and swing in here with the Colostria Nightwatch. Obviously, no reason not to. Joe is going to go ahead and block with the Erishan Cleric, just as a insurance policy, basically saying, it's possible Zombie has some kind of trick. I'm just going to go ahead and chump block here just to make sure there's not anything that he can do to beat me. And Joe's going to swing in with the Kieran, and looks like unless Zombie's got some kind of trick here, looks like he does not, then Joe is going to go ahead and take game 1. And so I'll be back in a minute for game 2. Hey guys, I'm back for game 2 of this Double League Grand Championship between ZombieNeko and joekewwl. Let's see, joekewwl won game 1 after a pretty close game, and so this is game 2. Again, this is the Grand Championship. Whoever wins this match will get the bulk of the boosters that was donated from Wizards of the Coast, so a lot on the line here. Obviously, both have already received prizes for winning first place in their respective phases of the Standard Pauper Double League. So let's see what we can do. We got, as I'm just typing in here, we actually got a pretty good audience here. Got several people watching. Always fun to see people coming out to watch the Grand Championship and support this great format. So excited to see how this turns out. It definitely seemed like ZombieNeko got pretty flooded last game. So hopefully he'll be able to have a little bit of a better showing here. But we'll see what happens. So pretty good matchup, I would say. The decks are fairly well matched. Obviously, the longer a game goes, I think ZombieNeko has the advantage. Particularly if he's playing cards like Deadbridge Shaman, which enable him to get some pretty good graveyard recursion going on. That the longer game definitely will favor Zombie. So what Joe wants to do here is to be able to get some creatures out pretty early and put a lot of pressure on the board. Obviously, he was not able to do anything turn 2, which is really a pretty important turn for any kind of white weenie build. You really want to get some very impressive creatures down very quickly and really start pushing damage as quickly as you can. Sadly, he's not even able to do anything on turn 3 either. So putting him way behind the curve, and Zombie's the one who's swinging in here. And that Deadbridge Shaman can actually do a surprising amount of damage. Being a 3/1, if you can get that into play quickly, you can do a surprising amount of damage. So Joe right away is going to go ahead and use Fiery Impulse to get the Predator off the board. Makes total sense. And looks like he's got some creatures he's able to play. Okay, so he does have the Sandcrafter Mage. Definitely another very solid card. If it comes down on its own, it's a 3/3 for 3, which is very reasonable. And if you've got other creatures on the board, the +1/+1 token instead ends up being on another creature, so that obviously works out very well. So let's see if he wants to block here. If he does, he knows his opponent's going to get the Predator right back. But he is going to go ahead, and looks like he's got a combat trick here to keep his Sandbridge Master alive at least. So he's essentially trading the Enshrouding Mist for the Deadbridge Shaman, but his opponent does get to get the Valakut Predator back into hand. But oh, I'm sorry, I'm confusing the Deadbridge Shaman with a different card. Instead, Joe just has to discard a card. My mistake. I for some reason I was thinking the Deadbridge Shaman was the card that brought a creature back into your hand when it died, but instead it just forces you to discard. Obviously, a very different kind of situation there. So it looks like Zombie is the one now who's rather than being mana flooded is short. It seems to be how it always goes with me anyway. I end up flooding one game and shorting out the other one. So fortunately, Zombie once again having some significant mana problems. He does have the Twin Bolt though to go ahead and get the Misttooth Kieran morph off the board. See if he's able to find some lands here, or this may be a very short game. He definitely needs to find more than 2 lands. Fortunately, it looks like he has enough removal here that he's going to be able to stay on top of us. Now, Because the Sand Bridge is already a 3/3 creature, if Joe had the ability to pump it up, he'd be able to save it. But he does not have another Enshrouding Mist to save it. And otherwise, the ZombieNeko just, again, is still stuck on 3 lands. Of course, the advantage of that is that he has a lot of different cards in hand, probably has a lot of removal in hand, and is able to keep dealing with Joe's creatures. Looks like Joe just passes the turn back on his turn. That is definitely a very painful place for him to be. ZombieNeko does find a second Predator. Let's see if Joe's got something that he's able to do here. He does have a removal spell for it, another Fiery Impulse to get the Predator off the board. So basically at the moment they're just trading creatures and removal spells, otherwise not a lot happening. And Joe once again just has to turn it back. Interesting, they're both stuck on low lands, although obviously normally that would favor Joe. And but a lot of creature removal in hand and not a lot else going on here. So ZombieNeko finds a third Valakut Predator. But again, with no land, just has to pass the turn back. He had a land at that point. He might even be holding onto it simply to pump up the Predator here. See if he did indeed find a land. No? Okay, he has an Elvish Visionary, though. So he may be able to draw into a land here. At one point I've seen, I don't think it was Zombie's deck, but I saw someone chain these Elvish Visionaries together in this deck in such a way that it just gets some amazing value. You know, pull 2 or 3 different Elvish Visionaries in a row right after another. So pretty good combination. All right, so Joe looks like it's probably sideboarded in. A Smite the Monstrous, great way to deal with the pumped up Predator. Gets that off the table. And again, just kind of exchanging creatures and removal back and forth. ZombieNeko did finally find a 4th land. So he's going to go ahead and tap his Evolving Wilds, and it looks like he went and grabbed a Swamp. And Zombie now has enough cards in his graveyard that he's able to go ahead and power out a Gurmag Angler as well. Which Joe immediately has a pacifism for. Again, what did I say? We're exchanging creatures and removal. It's funny, this is the way the Standard Pauper format used to be, that it was just this huge attrition battle between creatures and removal, and your individual creatures weren't nearly as valuable. With the movement away from printing cheap, effective removal at common and limited, it's become, most of the games have become less and less like that. It's become much more about the particular creatures themselves because they're much less likely to get removed. So interesting to see, though, in this particular matchup, both players are playing some of the better, if not the best, removal in the format, and they're able to just keep pushing out creatures. I will also remind you guys that as of this point, when I'm recording this, even though Oath of the Gatewatch had come out, that none of those cards were legal for this particular matchup. So if you're not seeing any of the Oath cards, there's a reason for that. They weren't allowed to use them in this Grand Championship, since most of the Standard Pauper Double League took place long before Oath of the Gatewatch was released. So ZombieNeko is able to get a Cluster and Nightwatch out, definitely one of his stronger creatures in the deck, and the fact that you can give it flying and allow it to fly over creatures is definitely very strong. Joe did manage to get an Crowan Sergeant onto the board, just a very solid 2/2 first strike, and if you can get in with it once, connect with your opponent, 3/3 first strike is, boy, one of the better creatures you can be doing in the format. ZombieNeko is able to swing in and now has 2 of those Night Watches in play, and suddenly Joe is in a whole world of hurt here. So he's going to need a way of being able to deal with those pretty quickly. And unfortunately here, all you can do is pass the turn back. Could have a couple different removal options, and now ZombieNeko is able to continue to pull ahead, casting Read the Bones, basically allowing him to look at 4 different cards. Not quite as good as the 4C, which came before it, but about as good of a removal spell as you can expect to see in black. He did go ahead and he put 1 on bottom, 1 on top, so relatively happy with what he's seeing, and swinging in for another 8 points of damage here. Let's see what Joe's able to do here. Let's see if he's having to chump block or if he's got a trick here. He does have some sort of trick. Okay, so he's going to go ahead and use a Fiery Impulse plus the Crowan Sergeant to go ahead and see if he can get at least one of the Night Watches off the board. See what looks like Zombie's got some sort of trick he wants to play here, trying to save his creature. So he's going to go ahead and use Twin Bolt on the Crow and Sergeant to get that off the board. Does Joe have something that he can do here? He does. He has Feeder Resistance to protect it, pump it up to a 3/3, and is able to kind of sidestep the Twin Bolt. And so they will go ahead and trade off the creatures, but definitely not the best situation for Joe to be in, but he does save his creature and gets the Cluster Healer, or I'm sorry, the Cluster Nightwatch off the battlefield. Interesting, he's going to go ahead and swing in here. It's possible he has an Enshrouding Mist. Enshrouding Mist would be really good here simply because that creature is renowned. He is able to untap it and get it back in the battlefield. Oh, interesting, and Joe is playing Territorial Rock. I don't think this was a card that I saw in his earlier build. Maybe something he brought in. Again, a fairly decent blocker simply because it is a 1/3 for 2, and as a flyer can get in for several points of damage. ZombieNeko does have a Reef Soul to get that annoying Sergeant off the board, and he's continuing to put a lot of pressure on his opponent. Joe looks like he's only got one card in hand, doesn't have a removal spell that's able to deal with the Cluster of Nighthawk, and he's going to need something right here, or this game is going to be over pretty quickly. So he does find another Sergeant. That's not going to do a whole lot against the Nightwatch, however. See if Zombie's got a way of getting it up to the battlefield. Oh, he's got a complete disregard, getting that Sergeant right out of there, and playing a land, keeping himself at a very solid 20 life. And this game looks like it is just about over. Joe has given his opponent a good game. See if he decides to chump block. He is going to go ahead and chump block here just to survive one more turn, looks like. And ZombieNeko's content with that. She's going to pass the turn back. And with that, Joe's going to go ahead and concede. So ZombieNeko wins game 2. I'll be back in a minute for game 3. All right, guys, we are back for game 3 of the Double League Grand Championship between ZombieNeko and joekewwl. They both won a game, and so whoever wins this particular game will be declared the Grand Champion of the Double League and will win the bulk of the Battle for Zendikar booster packs that were donated by Wizards of the Coast. So let's see who's going to win this. Looks like both players are able to keep their opener, and we are off to the races here. See if Joe has that ever-important 2-drop. Looks like this time he does. Has a Territorial Rock he will get into play. Again, not a card I've really seen anybody play. It's an interesting choice. Usually 1-powered flyers are just not something you want to do on turn 2. Generally not pretty good, but the fact that it has 3 power, or 3 toughness, might make it worth it. So ZombieNeko immediately has a Reef Soul to get it off the battlefield, and Joe follows it up with an Arishan Cleric. Another 1/3 for 2 mana. That instead of flying gets you 3 points of life. Definitely the card I would prefer out of the two. ZombieNeko has the Elvish Visionary to get a small creature into play, as well as draw himself another card. And Joe, unfortunately, Joe does not have a 3rd mana here, so that's a pretty heartbreaking place to be on your 3rd turn to not be able to play your 3rd mana. So let's see what ZombieNeko is able to do. He is keeping up with all his land drops, so he has drawn into a 2nd Elvish Visionary. And see if he's got a follow-up to that. He has a 3rd Elvish Visionary. So like I had mentioned earlier, this is another example where you start chaining those Elvish Visionaries together, and you can do some pretty amazing things. Able to get a whole bunch of tokens into play, draw through your deck. Definitely a very painful place for Joe to be in at this point. He's going to need to find something quick to stabilize against Zombie. He has to go ahead and use Tormenting Voice, discard his Sandcrafter Mage. At this point, just really digging, hoping to find a land, and still doesn't find one. So this may be a very quick game, unfortunately. On his turn, ZombieNeko finds himself a Valakut Predator, and has an Evolving Wilds as well to go ahead and hold on to prevent it from being killed by certain kinds of removal. Let's see what Joe's got that he's able to do here. Could have a pacifism for it. No, he has. Oh wow, he has to discard Celestial Flare as well to cast a 2nd Tormenting Voice, but it does allow him to finally find a 3rd land drop. But he is way behind the curve here, definitely facing down a whole bunch of pressure from his opponent, who has not yet missed a land drop, and thanks to those Eldritch Visionaries, has a pretty full board as well. So Joe can't do anything but watch as oh no, he's going to go ahead and block here with the Erishan Cleric, and I assume follow that up with an Enshrouding Mist. That is exactly what he does. So at least is able to keep it alive since it doesn't take any damage, thanks to the Enshrouding Mist. And ZombieNeko immediately has a Colostrum Night Watch. So a whole ton of pressure that Joe is under here. Let's see if he's able to dig himself out of this and at least make this match a little more interesting. Alright, so Joe does go ahead, has Bathe in Dragonfire, which I believe is something that he brings in from the sideboard here. Great option against the Valakut Predator, simply because it deals 4 damage. Even though he does go ahead and pop the Evolving Wilds, it's not enough to save the Predator. Don't know if that was a misplay on ZombieNeko's part, or if he just, once he knew he no longer had any use for it, wanted to just go ahead and pop it and get some value out of it. So swinging with the Cluster and Night Watch here. Oh, and he's got a trick for it as well, looks like. No, just tapped his mana. Not sure what that was about. Not sure if that was a misplay or if something happened there, I missed it. In any case, ZombieNeko does go ahead and get the Gurmag Angler out as well, continuing to keep a lot of pressure on Joe, and he's also up to a very respectable 28 life. So ZombieNeko in a very, very good place here. He is out of cards, and Joe still has a full grip of cards in his hand, but unfortunately, even with 3 lands, just has to pass the turn back. And ZombieNeko has yet another one of those lands that gains him a life and allows that Colostra Healer to fly in for damage. And at this point, he's just going to go ahead and swing in for everything. Try to put Joe away as quickly as possible. Joe's going to go ahead and block with his Erishan Cleric. The fact that he didn't play anything means he should have just a whole grip of removal in hand here. So as a feeder resistance for the Erishan Cleric, which protects it, but otherwise doesn't do him a whole lot of good. And he takes 7 points of damage unless he's got some other trick here. Let's see what else he's able to do. Does have a Fiery Impulse. Oh, and that'll be enough to go ahead and at least get the Gurmag Angler off the board, but drops him down to 9 life. The Sandstone Bridge is actually kind of a decent land drop there, simply because he's able to go ahead and get in those 3 points of damage to his opponent here and still have it back to block. See if he's got another option here. Nope, no more creatures. He's forced to have another piece of removal here. Meanwhile, ZombieNeko has yet another creature, gains him a little bit of life, and is going to prevent Joe from being able to block the Colostra Healer since it gains flying. See if Joe has an answer for it here. He does not, dropping him to 4. So he's basically got a 1-turn clock now. He's got to find a way of dealing with that Colostra Healer. The Cluster Night Watch. He does have a Fiery Impulse to go ahead and get the healer off the board, which may prevent it from at least being able to fly over. But he's going to need something pretty quick here to be able to stabilize, or this game is going to be over. So he does. Oh, he has the Smite the Monstrous. Okay, so he's able to get the Night Watch off the board. Unfortunately, doesn't look like he has any follow-up plays, just has to pass the turn back. But that Erishan Cleric will do a fairly good job of holding back the Visionaries, although if I was Zombie with my opponent down to 4, I would have attacked there, simply because he would have dropped Joe down to 2, and even though you lose a Visionary, you've already gotten a card out of it, so I would have definitely attacked there and kept the pressure on. But ZombieNeko decides to go ahead and hold those Visionaries back, and just passes the turn. Back on his turn, Joe has a Morph. Obviously, the only Morph he's playing is the Kirin Misttooth, so which he is able, it looks like, to go ahead and unmorph if that's what he chooses to do. Zombie's got quite a bit of land at his disposal. Be surprised if he didn't have anything he could do here. But looks like he's just content to play the long game and pass the turn back. And it is end of his turn. Joe's going to go ahead and unmorph the Misttooth Kirin, like I suspected. And now he's going to just keep swinging in with that Misttooth Kirin. Definitely, just a good strong beater. It won him game 1. And Yeah, just keep. Oh, and he's got a second one as well that he's going to be able to unmorph if he doesn't find anything better to do with his mana. Still definitely under the gun, but at least has a little bit of board presence here and is able to put some pressure back on his opponent and kind of stabilize and stay alive. He's certainly fighting back as hard as he can. Managed to get out of the land slump that he's in. Has 2 Mischief Kirans, looking pretty respectable, and just going to go ahead and swing in with those. Again, having Vigilance on him is so good, simply because it means that he can continue to attack and still be able to hold him back to block. And is now finally meaning to eat away at ZombieNeko's life total. So Zombie finds a duress here, which most of the time I don't think. Well, yeah, Joe's playing enough combat tricks and combat removal. It probably is pretty decent against him. Let's see if ZombieNeko's able to net anything off of it at this point. Joe does have 3 cards in hand, and some of those he's been holding on to for a while. Okay, so he's got a Feat of Resistance and a Crowan Sergeant. And ZombieNeko is able to get a kill shot out of Joe's hand, so that was a pretty good duress for him, for sure. Alright, so Zombie just going to go ahead and swing in with everything here, which kind of surprising that he's now chosen to do that, with Joe having so many creatures that he's able to keep back to block. So let's see, he obviously can't just let the Valakut Predator kind of march through, or it'll drop him down to 1. So I'd imagine he'll either chump block or kite. So he's going to go ahead and block like that and give up one of his Kirans. Potentially, he could also, we know he has a Feat of Resistance in hand, so that he's going to be able to protect one of his creatures. But Zombie also knows that, so I would expect that whatever he targets with a Feat of Resistance, that Zombie's going to be able to get rid of. Oh, instead, Zombie's got a Butcher's Glee. This is a card that I totally underestimated, thought really wasn't all that great. But the fact that it gives lifelink and regeneration really makes it a surprisingly good card. Simply because it makes that whatever creature you put it on deal so much damage and you get so much life off of it. And so although he's not able to kill off Joe, he is able to deal quite a bit of damage there and drop him to 1. And so now Joe's pretty much hurting here, but he's still fighting back with those Kirans. And drops his opponent down to 13, so we definitely still have a game. Adds a Topin Freeblade to the board, as well as an Crowan Sergeant, and suddenly we've had a major shift in the tide, and joekewwl, although only being at 1 life, has a very impressive board presence. He's going to be swinging in for 7 every turn, and I would say the momentum in this game has very thoroughly shifted here. So Joe's going to go ahead and swing in with the Kiran. Both Kiran, I would suspect, simply because the opponent has no way of blocking those. Drops his opponent down to 6, and Zombie's got 1 turn basically to come up with something, or Joe's gonna squeak out a win with only 1 life left. So let's see what happens here. Does ZombieNeko have the answer? Even if he's able to get rid of 1 of the Mischief Kiran, the game certainly is not over. He has not so far really had much in the way of answers to Joe's flyers other than, he's going to go ahead and concede, and joekewwl wins the match. Hey guys, I'm back. I just remembered that, in fact, this is a best of 5 and not a best of 3. So as it turns out, we are not finished. Although joekewwl has won the first 2 games, or has won 2 out of the first 3 games, that we potentially have 2 more games to play. So if joekewwl wins this game, then he will be the grand champion. If he does not win this game, then we'll have to go on to a 5th game to determine who will be the final winner. And so once again, we are off. So definitely was a very impressive win there from Joe, coming back from what looked like certain defeat to secure a win there with only 1 life point left. Very, very nicely done on his part. And Zombie just suddenly ran out of gas and very quickly went from being in firm control of the game to completely losing. So this time joekewwl does once again have a turn 2 play, Topin Freeblade, one of his better turn 2 plays. But Zombie immediately has the Reef Soul to get it off the board. So hopefully Joe has another Token Free Blade, and I'm hoping he'll have a land drop here. No, once again, doesn't have a turn 3 mana. Oh, the agony of that. That Joe has just had some of the worst luck from the shuffler in this particular match. This has been crazy how much trouble he's had with his lands. So Zombie does have the Stalwart here, and Joe's going to go ahead and attack right into it. No fear, and obviously he must have some sort of removal spell here, or he's got a Fiery Impulse, but it does mean that he's taking a 2-for-1 there to get the Stalwart off the board. Surprised ZombieNeko actually blocked there, but it was a good call by him, forced his opponent to show what he had, and Joe basically got 2-for-1 there. So not a great place for him to be. Get 2-for-1 and stuck at 2 mana. But as he's shown here, you should never count this particular deck out. He's quite capable of, even if he's down to 1 life, quite capable of coming back for the win. Plays a Territorial Rock, and Zombie's got another Stalwart, and once again is in firm control of the early game here. See if Joe's able to figure out something here. Still stuck on 2 mana, doesn't have any creatures to play, but he could very easily still have a combat trick here to keep himself alive a little longer. Let's see what's going on here. Let's scroll down here. Not sure why this thing sometimes has problems. Okay, and Zombie's playing. I don't know how many copies of this he's playing, but goes ahead and has a Seek the Wild, which is an interesting kind of interesting choice, but it does allow him to dig into his cards and find something that's going to be able to really help him here. So continuing to put a lot of pressure on Joe. Let's see if Joe wants to chump block here. If he's just going to take the damages pretty early on, I'd be surprised if he is going to go ahead and chump. Let's see if he's got the Enshrouding Mist here to save his no, maybe not. What's he going to do? Okay, so he decides not to block. Just going to let the Tajuru Stalwart push through. And see if Zombie has a follow-up. He does, has another Elvish Visionary. And with the Elvish Visionary in play, Joe's going to go ahead and Fiery Impulse the Colostra Healer, just get that off the battlefield. And Joe finds a 3rd land. So has survived, has managed to draw out of being mana screwed here. Let's see if that's going to be enough to keep him in this game or not. So continuing to hold back with the Territorial Rock. If nothing else, keeps the Elvish Visionary off his back. But can't do much against the Tajuru Stalwart unless Joe's got a particular combat trick, which doesn't look like he does. And Zombie has yet another Colostra Healer and land, and passes the turn back. So, what's Joe going to be able to do here? Once again, down by a pretty significant margin, and once again, no land, just has to pass the turn back. The only good news about that is that it means he has some kind of trick in play, presumably. If he doesn't draw a land, he probably drew a card that he could play, and has a kill shot to get the Tajuru Stalwart off the board. I don't think Zombie's got anything in particular that he can do to save it. He's just going to go ahead and use Complete Disregard on the Territorial Rock. All right. And then follow it up with another Tajuru Stalwart. So Joe finds a 4th land drop. A little point of life there. Very, very welcome for him. And see if he's got a creature that he wants to go ahead and get into play here. Or if he's just going to hold the mana up for yet another combat trick. Nope, he's going to go ahead and get something into play. Okay, he's got his... got the Misttooth Kieran that he's going to go ahead and get onto the battlefield as a 2/2 morph. Keeps the Visionary back on the Colostra Healer, although it looks like ZombieNeko, it's going to go ahead and Twin Bolt it right away and just get it right off the battlefield. And swing in for 5 points here, drop his opponent down to 6. And looks like he has the Nighthawk. No, it's a Gurmag Angler as well. So, what's Joe able to do here? Does he have the pacifism? Does he have the kill shot? One of those would be required here if he's going to stay alive. Has an Arishem Cleric. Okay, that would also do it, bumping his life total up to 9 and giving him a blocker. ZombieNeko finds yet another Elvish Visionary, allowing him to continue to dig deeper into his deck and find some more ammo. Oh, he's got to read the bones as well. So yeah, ZombieNeko is just burying Joe, it looks like, at this point. Keeps both cards on top. swing in with everything, I would assume here. Yeah, swing in with everything. I assume Joe's going to be forced to block the angler. See if he's got something to keep the angler alive. He doesn't. And at this point, Joe is probably going to concede, I would expect at this point. Yeah, he goes in and gives his opponent the good game. And so that is how the next match ended. Crazy. We have, both people have won 2 games, and so we're going to the 5th game. Be back in just a minute. All right, so here we go. This time, for sure, the actual final game in this best-of-5 matchup between ZombieNeko and joekewwl to determine who will be the grand champion of the Standard Pauper Double League and walk home with the bulk of the boosters from Battle for Zendikar, donated by Wizards of the Coast. And so we are off. joekewwl does have yet another Erishan Cleric. His ability to draw those in this game has been very, very strong, and has it on turn 2, no less. Does look like ZombieNeko is able to duress a feat of resistance out of joekewwl. Joe has both a 2-drop and a 3-drop here. Finally, looks like he's getting some cooperation out of his mana, getting some pretty nice pressure on his opponent early. Following up the Erishan Cleric with that Crowan Sergeant. ZombieNeko is able to get rid of right away with Reeve's Soul. Joe here is going to go ahead and has a 2nd Sergeant as well, and attack in with the Cleric here. See what Zombie's able to do back on his turn now. Has an Elvish Visionary. Again, another card that we've seen quite a lot of in this best-of-5 matchup. As well, here he's going to go ahead and use Twin Bolt and just get that Sergeant out of there. So, when you're playing Gen Colors, you definitely have access to a lot of removal, and that has definitely been the case so far in this matchup, is that both opponents playing lots and lots of removal and able to deal with their opponent's creatures that way. So Joe has a 2nd Erishan Cleric, bumping his life total all the way up to 27, and putting himself in pretty good shape. Fairly defensive build with both those 1/3s, able to hold lots of different creatures back here. Let's see what ZombieNeko is able to do after dropping a forest. He has a Tajuru Stalwart that he gets into play as 3/4. Again, one of the more solid things you can do with 3 mana in the format right now. And Joe immediately has a pacifism for it. Once again, looks like he is stuck on lands, but at least in this case, he is able to get up to 3. The deck's able to operate a lot better on 3 mana than it is to operate only on 2. And goes ahead. That's all he's able to do at this point. And let's see, ZombieNeko now has access to 5 mana, and they're going to go ahead and cast Read the Bones here, and is hoping to just dig his way into a victory here, dig deep into his deck. Looks like he is going to keep both of the cards. Well, no, he's thinking about that second one. Okay, so he does actually go ahead and send the second card to the bottom before drawing his 2 cards. And he doesn't even attack in with the Elvish Visionary. Interesting. So I think Zombie there missed a point of damage. No reason that I can think of, since I can't imagine he's going to want to block here, that he should have held that Visionary back. Oh, he is going to go ahead and block. Interesting. So he's just willing to get rid of the Visionary to save himself a point of damage. And Joe's going to add a Topin Freeblade to the board and pass the turn back. Zombie continuing to hit all his land drops, has plenty of access to all his spells, and has a Deadbridge Shaman here, as well as, it has a 2nd Deadbridge Shaman. So unlike what I thought earlier, the Deadbridge Shaman does not actually return a creature to your hand when it dies. Instead, it forces your opponent to discard a card. So, again, which, against Joe really seems like that may not be, although he's holding on to a lot of land tricks. Generally, that card would not be real great against White Weenie, simply because White Weenie doesn't hold a lot of cards in hand. But Joe's playing enough removal and combat tricks that it definitely would make him think twice. Now, Joe may have sideboarded into Twin Bolt, in which case, if he can find a Twin Bolt, that would be really the ideal solution to deal with those Deadbridge Shamans. So here, he's happy to just go ahead and swing in, though. And Zombie's happy to go ahead and block with both of his Deadbridge Shaman. Let's see what Joe's plan is here. He's going to go ahead and use his Shrouding Mist to pump up the Token Freeblade. Prevents it from dying. He is, however, going to be forced to go ahead and discard 2 cards, though, here. So let's see what he's going to discard. So he discards a Plains and a... So it makes me think he held on to a land, so it'll be interesting to see if that comes back to hurt him or not. And a Fiery Impulse as well. So that definitely hurts. You have to go ahead and discard those 2 cards. Now, granted, both of his creatures, or one of his creatures survived, so he got a little bit out of the exchange, but I don't think that exchange really went Joe's way. But he has put a ton of pressure on his opponent, but ZombieNeko is able to go ahead and get a Colostri Healer out here, as well as a Gurmag Angler. Wow, lots of pressure. So now, once again, it's going to be up to Joe to come up a way with dealing with his opponent's creatures. He really is going to have to find a way pretty quickly to deal, especially with a Colostri Healer. But the Gurmag Angler certainly presents a very formidable threat as well. At this point, all he's able to do, though, is go ahead and play a Morph. And back on Zombie's turn, he does have one of those come into play tap lands that gives him point of life, allowing the Colostri Healer to fly in. Oh, and interesting, he chose to go ahead and leave the Gurmag Angler back. Again, I probably would have attacked with it there. The best Joe could have done is stacked up 3 of his creatures to kill it, and it would have been a 2-for-1 in his favor. So ZombieNeko definitely playing it a little more conservative here, but given the fact that he is kind of on his back foot, being the one with a lot lower life total, maybe that's a good step for him here. And in all honesty, the longer the game goes, generally the game is going to be better for ZombieNeko. So he's looking at his options here. Doesn't look like he has any way of gaining life, down to 1 card. But is able to put a lot of pressure on here, so he's going to go and swing in with all his big creatures. I would expect Joe's got some form of removal here. Kill Shot would obviously work. Celestial Flare would work. Could have the Enshrouding Mist, although in this case that doesn't do him a whole lot of good. It prevents the damage, but it doesn't actually allow him to deal with any of the creatures. So he's going to go and stack them up on one of the Cluster and Night Watches and block the Gurmag as well. Could easily have 2 different combat tricks left in his hand. By playing an Enshrouding Mist, as well as one other, maybe a Feat of Resistance, or a Rebuke. Lots of different things he could have here, although the Rebuke would make less sense. So let's see what Joe's going to go ahead and choose to do here. So he does have the Feat of Resistance to play on his Topin Freeblade, which will allow it to stay alive. He's basically trading the Night Watch for his Kieran, which is a pretty good deal for him. And then it does look like the other one just jump blocked. And then Zombie adds the Valakut Predator to the board. And Joe finds another land. Of course, he had to discard 1 of them earlier. Down to 1 card in hand. His opponent has no cards in hand, so both have kind of run out of their initial cards, but ZombieNeko has a pretty decent card advantage here at this point. So Joe's definitely back on his heels a little bit. He does have the freedom to go ahead and attack in with that Free Blade, which not only gets him in for several points of damage, but also is going to pump it up to a 4/4 and make it a lot harder for his opponent to deal with. Keeps it out of complete disregard range, keeps it out of the Reef Soul range, so it's going to be a lot harder for Zombie to deal with that as a 4/4, and it's still able to even trade with the Valakut Predator. Oh, and Joe brought in Suppression Bonds, which he goes ahead and plays. Interesting to see that is a card that he chose to bring in from the sideboard. Not sure why in this format. Most of the time you prefer pacifism, but Joe's a very good player. I'm sure he's got a reason that he chose to include that in this particular matchup. So obviously Zombie could have a couple different tricks. You wouldn't expect him to attack with that Predator without having some kind of trick, and he does indeed have a Butcher's Glee that he's using on the Night Watch. Joe chose not to block at all, and that drops him all the way down to 10. Let's see what he's able to do in response. Obviously he's able to attack in here with the Topin Freeblade. He's going to go ahead and unmorph the Mistooth Kieran as well, which is going to allow him to attack for 7 in the air, which is certainly not something that ZombieNeko is going to be able to ignore for very long. It's a 3-turn clock here. But of course, ZombieNeko also has his opponent on a 2-turn clock between the Valka Predator and the Cluster Healer, but Joe's also able to keep his creatures untapped with Vigilance. So, pretty even board situation. Oh, but it looks like ZombieNeko once again is just curving out with those Elvish Visionaries and getting a ton of value by doing so. A 3rd Elvish Visionary. That's crazy. Drew 1, drew into a 2nd, drew into a 3rd. That's pretty good for him. And plus a Cluster Healer as well. That's just an insane sequence of draws there. Almost unbelievable, and the Cluster Healer now, the Cluster Night Watch is going to be able to swing in here for 4 points in the air. So unless Joe's got a combat trick he's holding on to, he's going to have a hard time, really being able to do anything here. So Joe is now in a world of hurt. Certainly not out of it by any means, but his opponent can put so much more pressure on him now with all those Elvish Visionaries. And looks like Joe doesn't have any tricks, doesn't have any way of dealing with a Night Watch, and doesn't have a lot of really good attacks here either. He does have the Sandstep Bridge that will allow him to pump up one of his creatures. I would assume he'll put that on the Kieran and be able to at least swing in the air for 4. But that's tough. He's in a very tough spot here. If his opponent attacks with everything, 1, 2, 3, his opponent will be able to get in for at least 4 points of damage. So Joe's going to need at least one more creature here just to be able to survive practically at this point. And so Zombie's just going to go ahead and chump the 5/5, take his 3 points, and it doesn't look like Joe has another creature to play. So the last card in his hand could be a land, could also be some kind of combat trick here. But whatever it is, we'll probably see it in a minute unless he's just going to go ahead and concede. ZombieNeko also is able to find a land to pump up his Valka Predator of 4/4. And Joe is going to be forced to to trade and chump just to basically stay alive unless he's got a trick in hand. I'm sure he's looking at all his options, trying to figure out if he's got any way of getting out of this. So he's going to go ahead and trade with the Valakut and chump. That's kind of what I was expecting he was going to have to do. Doesn't have any kind of trick, drops him to 2. And I can't imagine Twin Bolt. No, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything that could get him out of this at this point. So I have a feeling that is going to be how this particular matchup is going to end. So very, very good games by both players, back and forth. Was very impressed. Both decks played out pretty well. I would say Joe had kind of the worst of it as far as luck went, simply because he had so much struggle with his mana. But he is congratulating his opponent. Doesn't have anything else he's able to do against such a overwhelming board. Does have another free blade that he's able to get onto the battlefield, but not a whole lot. That's certainly not going to be enough to keep him in the game. And ZombieNeko is going to go ahead and be declared the champion of the Standard Pauper Double League. So congratulations to him. Again, both players have played very well and should feel very, very proud of their performances. It's been a pleasure to host such an amazing event and to be able to see so many players come together. Originally, we had over 60 players who were competing in this particular league. Very, very happy with how things turned out. But congrats to ZombieNeko as the champion of the Standard Pauper Double League. Thanks so much for watching, guys.